Morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's edition of MPC Markets Morning Call, 18th of August, 2025. Headline being stocks drift lower as Trump and Putin met and will meet in Alaska. So obviously they hadn't met, or they basically the planes were landing just before the market closed on Friday in the US. So the market really didn't have any guidance as to what was going to be said. But we essentially drifted lower on the back of some weaker consumer data and a jump in inflation expectations from the consumer as well on Friday, and prompting markets to sort of temper the expectations of aggressive Fed cuts. But on the back of that PPI number on Thursday, that was quite high as well. I don't have any major concerns over that, realistically. I think that's what the reality is. I think there is inflation. But I think Trump's new appointment to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics will ensure that, and it's done on a regular basis, certain things will be taken out of the inflation numbers, which is why the Fed relies more so on the PCE data rather than the CPI and PPI. But obviously there would have been a little bit of risk-off behaviour leading into the Trump-Putin meeting. It wasn't really too much to come out of it, to be honest. There was no formal deal. Both leaders called the talks productive. Major issues were largely unresolved. Trump's backed Putin's preference for negotiating a peace agreement. And really, as per usual, because there's been no sanctions placed on Russia at all at this stage, Trump suggested offering Ukraine security guarantees similar to NATO's Article 5, but the details were vague. It was really just a boost for Putin. And more, Putin seems to have a bit of a hold over Trump for some reason. He seems to be super aggressive with everyone else except them. And obviously I think they're going to speak to Zelensky at some stage. But I mean, the fact that he wasn't there probably didn't mean the meeting was was overly productive. It was super important that Putin, according to the media, rode alone in the Beast, which is the president's car, with no other advisors. And they will probably do some talks, at some stage down the track. But look, again, as most Trump things, a bit of a storm in a teacup as per usual. But Asian markets finished fairly strong on Friday. The ASX eking out sort of 1.5% gain for the week. The Nikkei was really strong at record highs, as was sort of Hang Seng and China. Euro stocks was up 2% as well. The Dow finished up 2% for the week, but basically flat on the day. The S&P and the NASDAQ were down a little bit less for the week, down up 1%, but down 1/3% for the S&P for the day, and down 0.5% for the NASDAQ, up around about 0.4%. The Russell did obviously get a boost on the back of rate cut expectations being brought forward. There's at least a 90% chance now that we're going to get a rate cut in September. Which, again, I think the stars are generally aligning a little bit. I think we'll just start to see some weakness out of those US numbers, and any smell of any weakness will be emphasised in the numbers as EJ Antoni gets confirmed and comes into being the Bureau of Labor and Statistics Commissioner as well. So they do need those rates down. It is super important, and I think for the greater good, that a short and sharp recession in the US is possibly the best plan for the country on a 5-year basis, but just not the next 12 months, and will be very unpopular overall. But there was talk on Bloomberg as well on Friday night about Warren Buffett particularly. So basically, Berkshire Hathaway gave out their holdings. They, as they've got to do every quarter, their significant holdings. They've taken a stake in United Health, which you can see down here, which has been it's been a horrible chart. We've spoken about on the morning podcast and on a number of occasions. but famous investors like Michael Burry from the central character in The Big Short and the movie from the GFC, and Warren Buffett and George Soros all taking stakes in United Health now, with investors who probably bought a hell of a lot higher. Who'd be feeling the pain at these lows, probably very much buoyed like this, and they don't tend to take a stake unless there's going to be some form of recovery. And I think Warren Buffett's been famous for taking stakes in companies in trouble in times of, well, he famously took a stake in the banks to in the GFC to stabilise confidence as well. So I dare say we'll be starting to look at that. United Health is a very large part of a lot of key healthcare ETFs, and I think particularly IXJ and which is the VanEck one, which has been around the longest, might start to see those stabilise now and head a little bit higher. So the broader healthcare sector was up overall as well. The banks, obviously, Bank of America was a holding that he trimmed, Berkshire Hathaway and Warren Buffett, and he trimmed Apple, which makes a hell of a lot of sense given the lack of progress in that. I'm very surprised, that they're still holding a significant holding in that company overall. Given the potential risks, we saw semiconductors drop a fair bit. There was a comment from President Trump about putting 200 or 300% tariffs on some semiconductors, and again, I find myself largely agreeing with President Trump. The fact that we've got 90% of the world's high grade semiconductors coming out of one factory that is on disputed land in Taiwan, which is also known for. I mean, it's had fires before and it's caused massive supply chain issues in the auto space. But I mean, they're also on a not a particularly stable fault line either, and having 90% of the world's key chips, which everyone is on, coming out of one or two factories around in Taiwan, it's not a sensible move generally, and obviously the Taiwanese hoarding it because it's kind of their shield against China invasion. President Xi apparently has reassured Trump that he will not invade Taiwan while Trump is president. Whether Xi actually said that or not, who knows? I'd rather hear that from the horse's mouth than from President Trump, given his sort of track record lately. We saw a little bit of weakness in the banks as well overall. So big week of earnings this week. Just ignore the BHP and CSL. Well, BHP will be this evening. CSL is actually tomorrow morning. Those two were incorrectly put on a couple of calendars overall, but I've rechecked this morning and we've seen they're going to see those results on Tuesday morning with Woodside as well. So, one of our largest companies, or the largest company in the materials, the largest company in healthcare, and the largest company in the energy sector, and possibly James Hardie could very well be the largest in the industrial sector, will be reporting on Tuesday. Today, the focus will be on BlueScope, Ampol. Audinate's got some earnings out as well. And what else we got? We got Media, Horizon, and Stanmore there. So Palo Alto out tonight as well. And then just got a few of the consumer, Home Depot, TJX, Target, Lowe's, Walmart through the course of the week. Baidu might be interesting on Wednesday for the Chinese sector. They seem to be lagging a little bit. Not much in the way of economic numbers. We've got Jackson Hole Summit over the weekend coming up. FOMC minutes is fairly moot, I would imagine. We'll just see, how many were inclined to start cutting rates, and we've got some European inflation on Wednesday, so Not much on the economic front. I think we've got some manufacturing PMIs later in the week as well. But for Australia, we're going to be all about Aussie earnings. It's a really significant week this week. Wednesday we've got Santos, Goodman Group, Northern Star in there on Thursday, GQG Partners on Friday, as well as Zip. So the list goes on. So I think that's where we will be less sensitive to macroeconomic news overall, and probably way more company focused. It's been a pretty good start to earnings so far. I think we can probably expect that to continue. CSL is probably looking at a fairly decent result. Hopefully, I think BlueScope will as well. Buffett's been buying into home builders in the US, and I think that thematic will continue with all the hurricane and wildfire rebuilding. The home builders have been doing pretty well, and BlueScope not subject to tariffs, so could be doing pretty well both here in Australia and in the US. So just having a look at the commodities here, was a fairly flat night. The US dollar was lower. You probably would have expected a little bit more out of gold and silver and platinum, to be honest, with the US dollar down 0.4%. But some fairly muted moves. Crude dropped a little bit. That would have been on potential positivity that there'd be some form of deal done between on Russian oil, but it didn't turn out that way. So the market is probably betting that Trump was going to cave, which was a fair bet. Coal overall was up slightly. Lithium again was up slightly, but it's had a good, outstanding couple of weeks. But I wouldn't say much in terms of movement for the commodities there overall. And we're very much just looking ahead and looking forward to Aussie earnings and the tail end of US earnings, and we will see what happens over the course of the week. If you'd like any general updates, we do single stocks during the days, so have a look out on the website. We may have a couple of updates and a couple of earnings previews coming into some of the bigger names later in the week. But hope you had a great weekend. Have a great day, and we will speak again tomorrow.
General advice warning. The content presented in this presentation is intended for informational purposes only and provides general advice only. It does not take into account your personal objectives, financial situation, or specific needs. This information should not be the sole resource when making investment decisions. We strongly recommend you seek the advice of a financial professional.